caused a gas leak. Instead of helping the boy, he was forced to go back. But it wasn't long before the hole collapsed, crushing the boy to death. Later, the leader of the Korean miners named Yoon Hak Chol wishes 3 teenagers good luck as they were planning to escape tonight. On the way, one of the escapees lost his balance and was spotted by the Japanese searchlights. He was shot dead on the spot. The 2 others managed to make it to sea but were immediately apprehended by a patrol boat. A year later, in Korea, a seeing-off party was thrown for the Koreans that were being drafted. Since the party was getting dull, an elderly woman requested the bandleader named Lee Kang-ok to play some jazz music. At the time, jazz was banned throughout the country, but Kang-ok agreed as long as the lady paid extra. Not soon after, Kang-ok signals at the band to change tunes and gives the cue to his only child, So-hee, to join him on stage. The hall gets lively, and people start dancing. Later, a police officer warns Kang-ok that the section officer is on his way to arrest him for fooling around with the official's wife. The bandleader makes a hasty exit and meets with the policeman that warned him. Turns out the 2 made an arrangement. Kang-ok bribes the policeman in exchange for helping him find work in Japan. A few days later, Kang-ok, So-hee, and members of the band are on board a ferry bound for the land of the rising sun. Mid-course the journey, Kang-ok gathers his crew, collects all their cash, and hides it in the instrument's case for security. Suddenly, a group of delinquents under a gang boss named Choi Chil-sung causes a scene. A Jap soldier then hoses the crowd with water and warns them that they'll be shooting any troublemakers next time. Chil-sung remains standing and asks if anyone can speak Jap. A woman named Mal Na-eon voice out and badmouths the gang boss for making a scene. Chil-sung proceeds to grab her hair, and in return, Mal Na-eon grabs him by the balls. Upon inflicted with unexplainable pain and with his manhood on the line, Chil-sung gives up, and the commotion dies down. Soon, the ferry docks, and Kang-ok approaches a Japanese officer stating that he got a recommendation letter from a Japanese detective back in Korea. The Jap officer reads the letter and signals the soldiers to take Kang-ok and his band into the train. When Kang-ok looks down and sees hundreds of recommendation letters on the ground, the band leader realizes that the recommendation paper he paid for was fake and that they're in a world of trouble. Moments later, Kang-ok and the same Koreans on the boat were transported to Hashima, the Battleship island. As soon as they arrive, Japanese enforcers board the ferry, start beating up the Koreans, then separate the men from the women. The men are forced into a field where their belongings are checked. Kang-ok takes the opportunity to inform a Korean turncoat that they were not drafted and then shows their performing license. To prove it, he and the others start playing music. Meanwhile, the women are inspected by a Japanese doctor for some venereal diseases. The doc informs the captive women that Hashima boasts itself of being STD-free and that they would like to keep the perfect record. The doc then notifies them to keep themselves clean. This hints that the women are to provide comfort services to the men in need. After playing some music pieces, Hashima's manager, Shimazaki Daisuke, addresses the crowd. And just like the women, the men are stripped naked and inspected for signs of diseases. The Japanese offer dirty housing, unbearable food rations, and basic personal necessities but eventually get deducted from their menial wage from digging coal in the worst possible conditions. Days later, while at the bathhouse, Chil-sung asked Kang-ok to translate for the sadistic Japanese overseer named Yamada. That he wants to fight the current Korean enforcer named Jong-gu. Yamada agrees, and almost immediately, Jong-gu attacks using a stick. Chil-sung managed to dodge, and the intense fight lasted after an exchange of fatal blows. But the gang boss overpowers Jong-gu. To remind the coward who beats his own people, Chil-sung scars the scoundrel in the face. Before it goes to the point of no return, Hak Chol makes his entrance and stops the unnecessary violence. On the other side of the island, a Japanese pimp introduces the new Korean comfort women to the Jap officials. Among them is the child, So-hee. The quick-thinking child escapes the inevitable debauchery by informing the drunk officials that she's the actual singer of the record playing on the phonograph. She then shows the record cover and explains that her father and the whole band are present in Hashima. Meanwhile, deep in mainland China, an OSS training camp for the Korean Liberation Army gives a mission to one of its best agents named Mu Young. His mission is to infiltrate Hashima and rescue Hak Chol. Weeks later, at Hashima, Kang-ok and his band were allowed to play for the Japanese audience at a lavish party. Meanwhile, deep below them, the miners are being worked to the bones and only eat dirt food. Minutes later, an accident occurs, causing the mine to be ablaze. Shimazaki decides to seal off the mine to stop the spread of fire. But after learning Hak Chul is trapped along with the other miners, he orders his men to do whatever means necessary to get Hak Chul out so that the remaining Koreans will not riot or rebel. Trapped deep in the mines, the Koreans tried to think of a way to get out before they ran out of oxygen. Moo Young suggests that they blow through it. Luckily, one of the miners has a stick of dynamite. Eventually, many of the trapped miners make it out alive. Later, Moo Young reveals his mission to the Korean resistance leader. After Hak Chul verifies his identity, they lend their ears to the agent's escape plan. In the tavern nearby, Chil-sung drinks with Mal Na-eon in hopes of getting to know her. The thug explains that he doesn't want romance but just wants her to talk. Late into the night, Shimazaki calls on Kang-ok and tries to convince the bandleader to have his daughter, Sohee, be adopted by a Japanese official, stating that she might have a better chance of survival while under the official's care. The following evening, Hak Chul's men approach the resourceful band leader, hand him money and ask him to get the post office key. Kang-ok smells something fishy and asks them why. But after not getting an answer, he threatens to squeal and disclose the info to the Japanese. With not much option, Moo Young reveals Hak Chul's escape plan. Kang-ok decides to return the money but gives them the condition that they have to bring him and his daughter. Not soon after, Kang-ok gets to work. First, he bribes the locksmith into making a duplicate key, then he cuts off a film strip and blows a powder into the keyhole so that he can identify which key was used. Afterward, his band distracts the guard while Kang-ok heats the key and sticks it into the film strip, making a trace of it. Then lastly, he goes back to the locksmith and hands him the film strip. After a while, he hands 3 key copies to Moo Young at the refectory. And that very evening, in the cover of darkness and heavy rain, the agent sneaks to the post office and uses the telegraph to successfully communicate with his contacts outside. But when asked how many passengers, Moo Young replied that it was just him and Hak Chul. Moo Young sees a safe with the Korean account records on the way out. 2 days later, Moo Young takes advantage of the enforced blackout and wakes up Hak Chul in the dead of night. At the same time, Kang-ok meets with a Japanese guard to trade homemade alcohol. Later, Moo Young kills the same Japanese guard and grabs his pistol on the way out. Unbeknownst to the escapees, Kang-ok witnesses the whole gig. Back at the quarters, Hak Chul's right-hand man goes to check on the leader but finds both him and Moo Young missing. On the other hand, Kang-ok rushes to get his daughter, Sohee. Before proceeding with the planned escape, Moo Young confronts the leader that all of the miners' bonds and pension payments, including those who died, have been taken from their paychecks and went to Hak Chul's account. Half of the money flowing into the leader's account is forwarded to manager Shimazaki's account. Hak Chul denies that he has any knowledge of it. Still, the agent exclaims that the leader's signature is all over various documents. Moo Young adds that there has been no successful labor strike nor escape. Also, Hak Chul never faced trial despite being known as a huge asset of the Korean Liberation Army. It could only mean one thing: Hak Chul has turned against his own people. And the young agent was right, the de facto leader betrayed the Korean trust for his own greed. Before anything can happen, Kang-ok and Sohee arrive, soon followed by Hak Chul's right-hand man. It's a standoff. Hak Chul states that the agent is an American spy with no ties to Korea, while Moo Young reveals the documents of Hak Chul's crimes. Not soon after, the American bombardment starts. The agent loses the gun after being tackled. It's 2 against 1. At the same time, Kang-ok grabs the account records and runs off. The bombing is causing chaos on the small industrial island. Amidst the attack, Shimazaki suffers burn injuries. The Japanese get in an air raid shelter, leaving the Koreans to fend for themselves. When the bombing has passed, Hak Chul shoots Moo Young multiple times after the agent's gun misfires. Right after that, Hak Chul's right-hand man comes in to check on his leader. But when Hak Chul learns that his subordinate has seen the file, he shoots him dead. Hidden in the rubble, Kang-ok and Sohee witnesses the betrayal. The next evening, while the Japanese were protesting to get the Koreans out of the island, Jong-gu and his goons spotted a Jap school girl, tried to rape her, and accidentally killed her in the process. To enforce order, Yamada takes charge and contacts HQ. The sadistic Jap was ordered to burn all the files that might be used against them because the US is gaining ground. Soon, Japan and its officers will face punishment for its atrocities. Given the situation, Yamada suggests eliminating all of the Koreans but has to start with killing Shimazaki. Meanwhile, Kang-ok finds Moo Young and teams up with the agent. The following day, Yamada uses the death of the schoolgirl to fuel the anger and hatred of the Japanese towards the Koreans. The culprit, Jong-gu, pretends to be the witness and blames Chil-sung for getting back at him. Chilsung doesn't try and defend himself, knowing that it wouldn't matter. Later that day, Yamada offers Hak Chul a way out of the island and surrender to the US. In exchange, Hak Chul has to vouch for Yamada, whom he helped with the Korean Liberation Army efforts. But first, they have to bury all the witnesses by gathering all the Koreans in the mine and blowing it to smithereens. With such a sweet deal, Hak Chul agrees. But little to their knowledge, Mu Young and Sohee heard everything. In the evening, the Koreans gather, and Hak Chul delivers a charismatic yet lying speech that they will be given the same treatment as the Japanese as long as everyone shows sincerity and attend the mine's first opening since the bombing. Before the de facto leader can finish, Mu Young voices out and reveals the planned massacre and Hak Chul's treachery. Kang Ok joins the fray and shows the documents for it. The majority of the populace couldn't believe it and started defending their supposed leader. Still, one of Hak Chul's trusted subordinates, the one with the glasses, confirms Mu Young's story. He witnessed the whole conspiracy unfold. The intellectual was present during the murder, and to solidify his claim, Glasses shows the prisoner tag ripped off from Hak Chul's shirt. The people turn, and Mu Young executes the traitor. The young agent takes responsibility for all 400 lives and plans an escape through the only way out of the island, which is by sea. While a few Koreans want to talk and negotiate with their oppressor, most Koreans gamble with the Great Escape. The plan is to move in groups and cross the coal belt over the wall and into the transport boat on the other side. The explosive team will tie up the dynamite with lantern batteries, the wounded will make shields out of mats, the women will make rope out of underwear, and the weapons team will gather weapons. In contrast, Kang Ok and his band collect bottles to make Molotov cocktails. Not soon after things were prepared, Mu Young, some trusted few reconnaissances the escape route and eliminated the guards. Meanwhile, Chilsung's gang members free their boss, and later, Mal Neon joins them. Chilsung knows full well that the escape will not go unnoticed. He and his gang will try to hold off the Japs as long as possible. After the coast is clear, they get moving. While on the way, a few guards unexpectedly patrol the escape route. With little option, Kang Ok approaches the guard and pretends to hand them some girls and alcohol. When the Jap soldiers lower their guard, the Koreans move in for the kill. Although the escapees manage to subdue the soldiers, some Japanese civilians start a fire on the Korean part of the island. The exodus was still taking place, and a few Koreans managed to make their way into the boat, but the large fire got Yamada's attention. As expected, the plan fails, and the alarm sounds off. The people panic and race to get on the boat. After a while, the Japanese soldiers fires at the escapees, and a chaotic fight breaks loose. The Japs have their firearms, while most of the Koreans have their homemade bombs. At the back, Chilsung and his gang gain ground and kill a few enemies. As daylight slowly rises, the chaos intensifies. The coal belt breaks, but the Koreans were holding on to make things worse. In fear for his child, Kang Ok leads the people to carry the belt up the wall so that they can use it to escape. Despite the crossfire and some getting shot, the Koreans united because their will and hope of making it out overpowered their fear of death. But the attempt comes with a cost of lives. Many Koreans died, but just as many made it on top and jumped into the sea. During the firefight, Mal Neon gets shot in the back, and all gang members die. In revenge, Chilsung beats his rival using a rifle and breaks his back. But on the way back, Chilsung passes alongside Mal Neon. Subsequently, Yamada shoots Kang Ok and Ma Young, but before he can finish the Koreans